Hi, my name is Tyler Murphy. I'm a graduating senior at Southern New Hampshire University, majoring in graphic design with minors in communications and video production. I'd have to say my interest in video production began in late high school when I took an elective class that featured television production. My high school actually had its own TV studio, which was very impressive to me and really kind of opened my eyes to this new field. I kind of made a jump from interest in TV production to student filmmaking when I took COM-128 my freshman year of college. Taught by Bill Milios, this class really kind of exposed the students to an entry-level student filmmaking, as well as really kind of get people engaged and interested in making their own unique films. As a beginner class, a lot of these films were shot on either iPhones or very basic cameras. I know I myself used a pretty simple flip camera that I had got for my birthday several years before, and it shot in HD, but it was definitely kind of a new thing for me to take this small kind of commercial camera and make films with it, especially because it only recorded an hour of video at a time, so it required a lot of plugging into the computer, dumping an hour's worth of footage, and then reshooting. Speaking about shooting films, the very first film I created for COM-128 was called How to Play Pool. Unfortunately, I don't actually have any of the footage from this shoot left to display here, but it was pretty interesting first film for me. The next film I shot for COM-128 was called The Stalker. This was my first narrative film, still only a few minutes long, but definitely much more ambitious than my first one. I used two new actors, or two of my new friends I hadn't used in the previous film, and they did a really good job of having fun with the roles. This short film in particular was about one of my friends kind of going about his everyday and being pursued by a mysterious stalker. And it ends in a very violent confrontation with kind of a moral twist at the end. I definitely feel like I was heavily influenced by the great masters of suspense, such as Alfred Hitchcock. And being really kind of impressioned by those kind of films, I really wanted to capture that kind of narrative essence in my first narrative film for the class, which I feel is really ambitious for a very kind of basic intro to media class. Looking back now, there's definitely some cheesy moments in that film. I tried to make the action scene gripping, but I think it came out a little bit cheesy, and but definitely a good groundwork to kind of understanding what makes a suspenseful shot, how to kind of cut away from things that I don't have the budget to shoot, like the stalker being stabbed repetitively. I feel like that was a really just fun project for me to work on. I just let my imagination run with it, and looking back and watching it, it's pretty funny to me, kind of where I went with it, definitely. My next film, and the final one I did for COM-128, was called Snoo, a Documentary. And this was, I think, a very pivotal film in my early student filmmaking career, because it kind of married the two concepts of a documentary as well as comedy to make a mockumentary. And this is a theme that I kind of carried over in later work. This was a pretty fun film to shoot. It centered around interviewing several of my friends who had already been in my earlier films, and just kind of asking them what they like about Snoo, and then kind of showing visually what they enjoyed about the campus, and with kind of a comedic tone, definitely lighthearted interviews. Then the second half of the film really featured a few of my other friends who had also been in the previous films. They kind of did like a little vignette of one of them saying, hey, why don't we go for a little adventure? Why don't we kind of go find my car? So they go on this trip down to the very low freshman parking lot on the other side of campus, just so they can get in the car and go on this trip. But when they get there, they find out that the friend who owns the car actually forgot the keys all the way back up in his room. I took that approach because not only was it kind of a common joke in the freshman class that they had to park all the way at the bottom, and it would be really, really unfortunate to kind of forget your keys and have to trek all the way back up and down. But it kind of had a bit of truth to it. It has that mockumentary feel in regards to the fact that that's actually kind of a real issue that a lot of freshmen talk about in terms of housing and having a car on campus, but had a comedic spin. And of course the guys and the actors in it, they had a lot of fun with it. So yeah, a couple years later, my junior year, I took a video production level 1 class with Bill Milios, and this was an awesome class. It really got the students to get their hands on the gear themselves. We were no longer shooting on our flip cameras or our iPhones. We were shooting on HD JVC cameras and incorporated advanced lighting, miking, things like that into our productions. So I learned a lot in the class itself, and then outside of class, I kind of had the freedom to rent out whatever gear I wanted and to kind of go out there and just shoot my films. The first film I shot for this class was called A Day in the Life of Logan McCarthy. Actually, I don't believe it's actually called that, mostly because that's the story I ended up with when shooting. But originally, I went to film a documentary about Radio SNU. As the training director on the Radio SNU e-board, I was very passionate about the club at that time, and I really enjoyed kind of working in the club and talking to the other members. My goal was to film a couple meetings, film the advisor kind of having an interview with me, as well as filming Logan McCarthy, who is very active on campus, and kind of explain why he liked the club and why clubs on campus were important. So it kind of transitioned from getting involved on campus, which is the actual title of the film, to kind of being the Logan McCarthy hour, which isn't a bad thing. Logan's a great guy and he's very animated. I really like this documentary. I feel like it has a really professional feel to it, good lighting and good solid camera work for the interviews, and I'm actually very proud of it. I made do with what I had and what I shot, and in the end I created, I think, a very professional looking documentary that highlighted a good friend of mine. My other film I had made for that video production class was actually a pretty fun film. It's called The Director. This was another kind of loose mockumentary where I had myself introduce the works of this great director who was kind of egotistical and a little mysterious. His disappearance was unknown, but he left behind a lot of films that a lot of people considered weren't good, but kind of had this like mystery about them. I really enjoyed making this film. I came up with a pretty cool screenplay that incorporated a lot of my friends and gave them a little bit of wiggle room to improvise certain situations, but to also kind of come up with that analogy film feel with multiple stories. The main central story in the collection involved almost a kind of like gang war type of thing shot around campus. I really enjoyed shooting this and had a lot of fun with my shots. Probably the most famous shot from, I say use the word famous, but the most interesting shot I'd have to say from that student film I made was my friend Zach walking across the streets to get to the building. This was a lot of fun because I shot him multiple times walking across the street, and then in the editing room cut it so it looked like he was taking forever to get across, even though it was a very short street. And I think that really showed me to myself my love for editing. It really kind of enabled me to create a scene out of just taking different shots. And I thought it was really cool to see the final product, because for that scene in particular, I had a vision. I shot hoping that it would work out in editing. I definitely edited to make it work out well. It came out really cool. I thought it was pretty funny, and that kind of tone, that scene we shot at the beginning of the day, that kind of tone carried on throughout the rest of the production, and we had some really cool moments and some nice editing. there's a great scene in the bathroom where Aaron is looking at a note in one of the stalls, and I ended up standing on pretty much in a sink to kind of get an overhead shot of him. And there are just moments like that in filmmaking that really make me love the craft. Knowing that something's going to look really cool on screen after you edit it, kind of like the preemptive going out there and just getting that shot. The film itself might have been a bit silly. With not a lot of, I didn't have a lot of control over the lighting and whatnot, but I think it really exhibits a good sense of humor, as well as a good skill and getting the shot that I needed for each scene. So that's about it. I really appreciate the time I've had at SNU and working in the video production minor. It is a great program, one that I wish could expand into a major, because I'd love to take that. And yeah, I had a great last 4 years, and I feel like I've had a nice variety of work to show for it, and I've definitely picked up a lot of hands-on skills I don't think I would have if I hadn't even been involved in these classes. Also, per my honors thesis, I hope that in the future student filmmakers will be interested in screening their films and having an annual student filmmaking festival. That would just be great, and I'd love to see the university continue to support the student filmmakers on campus as well as the minor.